want to take a listen to three top officials who were at yesterday's Africa Investment Forum. It's the second roadshow preparatory to November 2019, second edition of the Infrastructure Investment Program in South Africa. Of course, this was under the auspices of the AFDB, that's the African Development Bank Group. And of course, Nigeria's hosted the second roadshow yesterday. And it is all about infrastructure, funding, bridging the gap across the continent, talking about the projects, bringing the project and the financiers and everyone who has deep pockets together to the same table. So we have an idea of this. Last year, Nigeria pulled about $7 billion of nearly $40 billion that the entire continent, countries who are part of that program came to. So Nigeria is part of the destinations where some projects and funding were secured last year. So the AIF thinks it's good to touch base with Nigeria once again, and all in the countdown to what's going to happen the second week of November this year. So let's take a listen to Ibrahim Afal. He's the country director for EFDB Nigeria, speaking at the AIF Forum in Abuja yesterday.
It is a multi-stakeholder, multidisciplinary collaborative platform for international business and social impact investors looking to invest in the continent. It is a highly transactional marketplace dedicated solely to advancing projects, to bankability, raising capital, and accelerating the financial closure of deals. The African Development Bank in Nigeria convened an investors forum in 2018 to create awareness and drive traffic to the maiden forum through a similar gathering of this kind. The Nigeria Roadshow was held to ensure that key industry players and policymakers maximize opportunities to connect, engage, and close high-end and high-impact projects which prepare Nigeria, which would prepare Nigeria for the investment forum in South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, my colleague Ezekiel, sitting right here, and the panel discussion to follow, will provide more detail, more color around last year's maiden forum in South Africa. But I would just like to say for now that we were able to convene over 2,000 participants representing 87 countries, including 8 heads of states. Deals worth a total of about $47 billion were discussed, with 49 deals valued at $38.7 billion secured. You must admit that these figures are not just impressive for an attempt at something that has never been done, but it was phenomenal, truly phenomenal. And to think that it was all done in 72 hours, over a period of 72 hours, was even much more remarkable, I think. These figures show that the untapped business opportunities in Africa, stemming from deals that cut across all sectors, reinforce the strategic vision of the bank as enshrined in the high fives, which are to light up and power Africa, to feed Africa, integrate Africa, industrialize and improve the quality of life of all Africans. Permit me to reflect on the performance of our region, the West African region, in Johannesburg last year. This will give you a clear impression of how much higher we need to raise the bar for November 2019, when we stormed the Africa Investment Forum as Africa's largest economy. At the 2018 Africa Investment Forum, West Africa accounted for 36% of all the deals that were closed. 19 projects worth $16.1 billion were presented, of which 16 projects valued at $13.1 billion secured investments. Our region grossed the highest value in terms of deals, followed by the host region, Southern Africa, accounting for 23%. Nigeria was very visible, of course. Out of the 63 boardroom deals presented at the forum, Nigeria had 5 deals worth $7 billion. This represents 14.9% of the total deals accounted for in the continent, and 43% of the deals accounted for in the West Africa region. But we can do better this year. This year, it is paramount that we not only maintain our place as the pace setter, but also collectively strive to improve on the quality and the quantity of the deals closed. Ladies and gentlemen, let us remind ourselves that Africa is ready, and of course, Nigeria is ready. The investment landscape is promising, and it is time to put our money where our mouth is. Permit me to tell you why. First, there's the growing demographics. 60% of the global population growth until 2050 will come from Africa. Secondly, we have the highest investment rate. The rate of return on foreign investment is higher in Africa than any other developing region, 9.3% and still growing. There's also upward economic trajectory. African countries continue to demonstrate economic resilience with an expected GDP growth of 4% in 2019, signifying growth above expectations. Of course, we're leading in digital transformation. Africa leads the world in mobile adoption, and 40% growth is expected by 2025, which continues to offer cross-sectoral economic opportunities. Of course, these megatrends are compelling and they cannot be ignored. The message is clear: African economies are resilient because of macroeconomic stability, good governance, rising domestic demand, and increased regional trade. Nigeria will be a big part of this story. Its recovery from the 2016-17 recession attests to the improving economic and financial landscape in Africa. We are now seeing positive momentum in building transparent and durable institutions to anchor the political economy, promote and support growth of the private sector in order to increase the pace, depth, and spread of economic growth. We also see that foreign direct investment is growing both in Africa and in Nigeria. In Nigeria, we also, with a population growth rate of about 2.6%, population is expected to increase to 411 million by 2050, of which 55% will be young people. So these mega trends, I think, are compelling for any investor looking into the future. The African Investment Forum offers a unique opportunity to access numerous options for sound, innovative, and economically viable growth for the continent, and especially in Nigeria. Even with gross international reserves of $45 billion and a pension fund of about 8 trillion naira, Nigeria will need a considerable amount of private finance to bridge its cumulative infrastructure needs of about $3 trillion by 2024. The time for bridging this gap, we believe, is now. We are hosting the Nigeria Roadshow in collaboration with the Africa Finance Corporation, of course, whose mandate includes to bridge Africa infrastructure gap.
That's Ebrima Fa, the country director of AFDB Nigeria, providing the background of the roadshow of the Africa Investment Forum. But what are the further details of not just infrastructure, but the financial intermediation, the process that we need to go through? And this is what the senior director in charge of investment group within the AIF spoke about. Taiwo Adeniji, let's take a listen to him.
As everyone said, the Africa Investment Forum debuted last year in 2018 in Johannesburg. It's going to be an annual event, and the next session of it will be taking place in Johannesburg in November this year. And we do hope that most of us here will be able to participate in this, in the next session. Infrastructure development has always been a major issue for Africa. The lack of infrastructure, poor infrastructure, is said to cut Africa's GDP by as much as 2% and reduces our productivity by up to 40%. So in every sector that we look, is it in power? Is it in transport infrastructure? Is it in major industries? The deficits are just massive. And those of us in finance, in governance, we need to do everything that we can to change the narrative. And the Africa Investment Forum is one very important initiative that hopes to drive this change. Basically, matching the sources of development capital with the users of development capital. For those of us in development and finance, we see that the issue is not lack of funding. Actually, there's so much funding moving around looking for good investments. So the issues are, one, developing bankable projects, and two, improving our financial intermediation. That is, matching those who need funding with good projects with those who have funding looking for good projects. And that is really the key objective of the Africa Investment Forum. And the debut session in 2018 has shown how important this initiative is, given the significant achievement that were recorded, as Ebrima said. And the 2019 session is hoping to build up on these achievements. So Nigeria is a major player in Africa in every field, be it in the economy, etc. And we do expect that Nigeria will be a major participant at this year's Africa Investment Forum. The Africa Finance Corporation will be quite keen to support African Nigerian businesses, those in infrastructure, those in natural resources, those in major industries, not only to participate in the Africa Investment Forum, but actually to get their projects ultimately implemented. So let me welcome you again, and we will have an opportunity in the course of today to discuss, to see how AFC can be supportive of your respective investments and how we can all together achieve the objective of turning around the story of infrastructure development in Africa.
Speaking specifically to Nigeria, which is the host of the of the Investment Roadshow, Dr. Kayode Fayemi is the governor of Ekiti State and the chairman of the Nigeria Governors Forum. So he was at the event yesterday and spoke specifically to how to resolve some of this infrastructure deficit gap in Nigeria and what the NGF will be looking forward to achieve.
The African Investment Forum is a necessary platform for attracting the capital required to accelerate Africa's development. And I'm delighted that this roadshow is happening here in Nigeria to help us prepare and develop a pipeline of projects that could benefit from the funding mobilized at the forum in November 2019 in Johannesburg. Africa has an estimated financing gap of over $8 trillion infrastructure financing alone, and it needs almost $200 billion per year. But commitments still hover around the $80 billion mark. This means the continent still needs to mobilize over $100 billion annually to meet its infrastructure gap. According to our own National Infrastructure Master Plan, 2014 to 2044, and I gather Chidi was here earlier, seems to have left now. Nigeria needs about $3 trillion over the next 30 years to bring our infrastructure, to bridge our infrastructure financing gap. It's therefore inevitable that we must actively seek private capital to deliver the infrastructure stock required to grow our economy in Nigeria and put millions of young Nigerians in jobs. Therefore, this roadshow is an important step in ensuring that Nigeria and Africa start to accelerate infrastructure and industrial development. With the support of the African Development Bank and African Finance Corporation, and the quality of investors that attended the inaugural edition in South Africa last year, I am confident that if we put our best foot forward, we will receive significant funding commitments for investments across Nigeria and the continent. Last year, 45 deals across Africa worth over $32 billion secured investment interest, including the $3.1 billion brass fertilizer and petrochemical project in Nigeria. This year must be certainly better. Nigeria is open for business, and our efforts after this roadshow must complement a lot of the positive initiatives championed by the federal government. These include improvements in the business environment at national and subnational levels, being championed by the Presidential Enabling Business Council, PEBEC, the work being done by the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission, NIPC, to create the appropriate incentives for both foreign and domestic investors. And finally, what we are doing at our level at the Nigerian Governors Forum, where we are also planning an investment forum in November this year, that has made investment promotion and by extension job creation a critical focus area of our operations. I am confident that after this roadshow, both government and private sector institutions will have a better appreciation of how to present bankable projects that will lead to Nigeria receiving a much higher investment commitment from the AIF compared to our outing in 2018. In Ekiti State, we're preparing for this year's forum, and we're keen to take full advantage of the marketplace. We've passed the law establishing the Ekiti State Development and Investment Promotion Agency, ECDIPA, and are currently operationalizing the agency. And once the agency commences full operations, it will provide investors with a one-stop shop to deal with investment-related matters. 3 weeks ago, my team started with the AFDB team in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, and we went through a whole range of projects that we want to receive parts of the AIF funding in November 2019. It's not enough to approach a marketplace like the AIF with bankable projects. We must also make the business environment conducive for investment. This is why we have also inaugurated a high-level committee to identify and implement the reforms required to improve the business environment. As I conclude my remarks, I urge you to reflect on the fact that over $100 trillion of capital has been mobilized globally, most of which is currently invested in low-interest yielding assets. With better returns and growth rates expected to exceed 4%, Africa is well placed to attract at least 1% of the $100 trillion annually. So I agree with Mr. Deniji that the finance is really not the problem. It's the projects that we have to put together. And if we achieve this, it will go a long way in solving our infrastructure development challenges. And like the president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Kumi Adeshina said, Africa does not need aid, it needs investment. It's now our collective responsibility to present our investment opportunities in a manner that appeals to investors.
The Ekiti State Governor and the current chairman of the Nigeria Governors Forum talking about, yes, investment is needed, we need the funding, the projects has to be bankable, but again, talking about the business environment, Governor Fayemi of Ekiti State, there's a need for Nigeria to improve the business environment. And one of the key issues of improving Nigeria's business environment has to do with tax disputes, oftentimes between corporates and some individuals as well as the tax agencies. So what has been achieved within the last 8 months when the new tax appeal tribunal was set up by the FRS? According to the chairman, Mohammed Abubakar, a total of 42 cases have been resolved, and this worth 288.1 billion naira on one hand and $5.41 billion on the other hand. This giving an account on Tuesday about what has been done over the last 8 months. The tax appeal chairman says more is being done to resolve the total inherited 215 cases when it took office. We'll be right back in 2.